The marble floor was still wet when Calla Pruitt walked into Ashford House and saw her mother on her knees, scrubbing around the legs of a dining table where other people had just finished eating. Opal's hands were red and swollen. A plate holding cold leftovers sat on the kitchen counter like wages for a day's labor. Calla had spent 10 years building a company worth millions, so her mother would never have to beg, borrow, or work herself sick again. Yet Opal looked up with fear instead of relief and whispered, "You weren't supposed to come today. Welcome to today's story." If you enjoy emotional drama and shocking twists, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more unforgettable stories. And before we begin, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. 3 weeks earlier, Calla still believed her mother was safe. Calla Pruitt knew what abandoned houses smelled like. She knew the scent of old wood sealed away for decades. She knew the smell of dust trapped beneath furniture covers. She knew the silence that settled inside homes where nobody had lived for years. Those houses had built her future. At 36, she owned one of the most respected estate-cleanout companies in southeastern Pennsylvania. Real estate attorneys hired her. Probate firms hired her. Property managers called when they needed a house emptied, documented, and prepared for sale. She had started with a mop, a borrowed truck, and more determination than money. Now she employed 18 people. The business had made her wealthy, at least wealthy enough that she never worried about grocery bills anymore. Unfortunately, money solved fewer problems than she had once imagined, especially where her mother was concerned. 2 years earlier, Opal Pruitt's kidneys had begun to fail. The treatments helped, but recovery was uneven. Some weeks were good, some were frightening. 6 months ago, after a difficult hospitalization, Opal had moved into what Calla believed was a private recovery residence connected to a long-term care program. The arrangement had been recommended through contacts connected to Ashford House. Calla paid every invoice, every fee, every bill. She never missed one. Whenever she asked to visit, there always seemed to be a reason to postpone. Opal was resting. Opal was in treatment. Opal was having a difficult week. Calla hated it, but she accepted it, because every explanation sounded reasonable, until Ashford House called. The email arrived on a rainy Tuesday morning. Ashford House Estate. Property preparation contract, priority timeline. The property manager explained that the estate would soon be listed for sale. They needed a complete inventory and clean-out before potential buyers arrived. The payout was substantial. Calla almost declined. Then she saw the name attached to the authorization documents. Fleming Brist, the owner representative, the same man whose office had helped arrange Opal's care. Something about that coincidence bothered her. Not enough to refuse the contract, but enough to read every page twice. That was when she noticed the restrictions. No photography inside certain rooms, no independent inventory review, no outside consultants. And one specific instruction typed in bold letters. Westy Rimmons closed. Do not enter. Calla stared at the sentence. Over the years she had worked inside hundreds of estates. People locked rooms for many reasons. Valuables, private papers, family embarrassment. Still, something felt strange. If the house was being prepared for sale, every room eventually had to be documented. She made a note to ask later. The morning she drove to Ashford House, the sky hung low and gray above Chester County. The estate sat beyond a long private drive lined with oak trees. The house itself was enormous, stone walls, tall windows, old money. The kind of place that looked impressive from a distance and cold up close. Calla parked beside her equipment trailer and walked toward the front entrance. The property manager was nowhere in sight. Neither were any of the estate staff she had expected. The front door stood partially open. She stepped inside. The house was quiet, too quiet. Then she heard movement, a scraping sound. Back and forth, coming from the dining room. Calla followed it. The moment she reached the doorway, her world stopped. Opal was kneeling on the floor. A bucket sat beside her, a rag in her hands. The old woman moved slowly, carefully, as if every motion hurt. For a second, Calla genuinely could not process what she was seeing. This wasn't a care facility. This wasn't recovery. This wasn't rehabilitation. This was labor, humiliating labor. Mom? The rag slipped from Opal's fingers. She looked up. Shock flashed across her face. Then fear. Not happiness. Not relief. Fear. Calla crossed the room immediately. What are you doing? Opal struggled to stand. You shouldn't be here. The words hit harder than any explanation could have. Calla grabbed her mother's hands. The skin was cracked, raw. Who has you doing this? Opal glanced toward the hallway. The movement was small, instinctive, like someone checking whether they were being watched. No trouble, she whispered. Please don't make trouble. Calla felt something cold settle in her stomach. Mom, you're coming home. Opal shook her head immediately. I can't, I signed papers. What papers? Opal looked down. The agreement. What agreement? Opal swallowed. The one you approved. Calla froze. I approved? Opal nodded. They told me you signed everything. Silence filled the room. Calla stared at her mother, then at the bucket, then at the plate of leftovers on the counter. Someone had convinced Opal that this was normal. Someone had convinced her that Calla knew, that Calla had agreed. Before Calla could ask another question, her eyes drifted beyond the dining room, down the west hallway, to a heavy wooden door secured with a brass lock, the west study, the one room forbidden in the contract, and at that exact moment Opal's entire expression changed. Fear deepened in her eyes. She grabbed Calla's wrist, hard, harder than she had in years. Don't open that room, she whispered. Then she looked over her shoulder again and added, almost trembling, he said nobody can ever go inside. Calla did not let go of her mother's wrist. For a few seconds, the only sound in the dining room was the faint drip of dirty water from Opal's rag into the bucket. The house seemed to be holding its breath around them. Beyond the long windows, the November light pressed gray against the glass, and the old stone walls made every silence feel colder than it should have been. Who told you that? Calla asked. Opal's eyes stayed on the hallway. Please, Mom, look at me. Opal tried to pull her hand away, but Calla held on gently, not tight enough to hurt. Just enough to say she was not going anywhere. The woman in front of her looked smaller than the mother Calla remembered. Opal's gray hair had been pulled into a loose knot at the back of her head. Her sweater was too thin for the house. Her shoes were flat black work shoes, cracked at the sides, the kind Calla had not seen her wear since the years when every dollar mattered. Calla looked at the bucket again, then at the plate of leftovers, cold potatoes, half a slice of roast beef, a dinner roll with one bite taken out of it. Her throat tightened. Is this what they gave you? Opal's face changed with shame. That was what broke Calla first. Not the rag, not the floor, the shame. As if Opal had been caught doing something wrong instead of being humiliated by someone else. It's fine, Opal said softly. I wasn't very hungry. Calla turned toward the kitchen doorway. Who is here? No one right now. Then we're leaving. Opal shook her head so fast she almost lost her balance. No, Calla, no, you are not staying in this house another minute. I signed papers. You keep saying that. What papers? Opal pressed her lips together. Her hands trembled, and Calla realized it was not only from weakness. It was fear, a trained fear, the kind that did not come from one bad morning, but from being corrected again and again until silence felt safer than truth. They said it was temporary, Opal whispered, just until the care balance was settled. What care balance? The residence, the treatments, the extra fees. Opal swallowed. Fleming said there were expenses you couldn't keep covering. He said this arrangement would help. Calla stared at her. For a moment the words did not make sense. She paid for Opal's care through automatic transfers. She had approved nothing involving labor, food, or this house. Every invoice had cleared, every receipt had been filed. Her accountant could prove it in an hour. I never said that, Calla said. Opal looked at her then, really looked at her. Something fragile flickered in her eyes, like a lamp trying to stay lit in a draft. He told me you did. Calla felt the floor shift beneath her, not physically. Worse, the whole story she had been living inside began to tilt. Who is he, Mom? Opal did not answer. Calla already knew. Fleming Brist, the man whose name sat on the Ashford contract. The man whose office had arranged Opal's so-called recovery placement. The man who had sent polite emails and attached clean invoices and written phrases like transitional support and private care offset, as if human dignity could be folded into a billing category. Calla released Opal's wrist and pulled out her phone. Opal grabbed her hand at once. Don't call him, I'm calling my office. No, Opal's voice cracked. If you make this worse, they'll say I violated the agreement. There is no agreement that lets anyone feed you scraps and put you on your knees. Opal looked toward the west hallway again. You don't understand, then explain it to me. I can't. Why? Opal's eyes filled, but no tears fell. She had always been good at holding them back. Calla had seen that her whole life. Opal could be in pain, exhausted, scared, and still find a way to keep her face steady so Calla would not worry. It had once felt like strength. Now it looked like a habit that had cost her too much. Because some things get worse when you say them out loud, Opal said. Calla took a slow breath. She wanted to shout. She wanted to drag Opal out through the front door and dare anyone to stop her. But she had spent too many years working inside estates like this. Houses with attorneys attached to every room. Families who could turn a missing spoon into a lawsuit if they wanted to. If she acted wrong now, Fleming would use it. So she made herself think. Where is the paperwork? Opal blinked. What? The agreement, the papers you signed, where are they? I don't have copies, of course you don't. They said copies were kept with the estate manager. Calla nodded once, then turned toward the foyer. Stay here. Opal reached for her. Calla, I am not leaving you, Calla said. I'm finding the paper. They used to do this. She walked fast through the dining room, past the long table polished so brightly it reflected the chandelier above it. That made the anger worse. The table had been cared for, the silver had been cared for, the marble had been cared for, her mother had not. Near the front hall she found a small office that had been set up for the property manager. A laptop bag sat on one chair. A stack of folders rested beside a printer. Calla did not touch the computer, she knew better. But the folders were labeled by room, vendor, and access category. She found one marked Resident Helper Agreement. Her hands went cold. She opened it. Opal Pruitt, care offset support, light housekeeping duties, reduced meal allowance, restricted access during estate preparation. And near the bottom, in a clean digital copy, was a line that made the room narrow around her. Approved by family representative, Calla Pruitt. The signature looked like hers, almost. Calla stared at it long enough for anger to turn into something sharper, because the signature was not only forged, it used a version of her name she had not used in years. Calla Marie Pruitt. She had dropped the middle name from all business documents after forming the company. Only old medical forms, old family paperwork, and a few private records still carried it that way. Someone had not guessed. Someone had copied. A quiet sound came from the doorway. Calla looked up. The property manager stood there, pale and stiff, one hand still on the doorframe. You're not supposed to be in that file, he said. Calla closed the folder but kept her palm on top of it. My mother is on her knees in that dining room because of this file. The man's eyes flicked toward the hallway. Miss Pruitt, I think you should wait for Mr. Brist. I think Mr. Brist should explain why my signature is on an agreement I never saw. The property manager's face tightened. Not surprise, not confusion, fear. That told Calla enough. Before he could answer, the front door opened. Calm footsteps crossed the foyer. A man's voice followed, smooth and controlled. That won't be necessary. Calla turned. Fleming Brist stood beneath the old brass light fixture in a charcoal coat, leather gloves in one hand, his silver hair perfectly combed despite the damp weather outside. He looked at the folder beneath Calla's hand. Then he looked past her, toward the dining room where Opal still stood frozen in her thin sweater. His expression did not change. Calla, he said quietly, I was hoping we could avoid making your mother more confused than she already is. Calla's hand tightened on the folder. Behind Fleming, down the west hallway, the locked study door sat in shadow, and from where she stood, Calla could now see something she had missed before. An old inventory card had been taped beside the brass lock. On it, in faded ink, was her mother's name. Calla kept her eyes on the faded inventory card beside the brass lock. For a moment, Fleming Brist's voice disappeared into the background. The property manager, the hallway, the entire house. All she saw was the name, Opal Pruitt, written in faded black marker on an old inventory tag that looked at least 20 years old. Her mother noticed it too. Color drained from Opal's face. Mom, Calla said quietly. Opal immediately looked away. That was answer enough. Fleming stepped forward before either of them could say more. I think we're done here. His tone remained calm, professional, almost pleasant. That somehow made it worse. Calla turned toward him. You forged my signature. Fleming glanced at the folder in her hand. That's a serious accusation. It uses a version of my name I haven't used in years. Perhaps you forgot, I didn't. Silence settled between them. The property manager shifted uncomfortably near the doorway. Fleming sighed. Your mother has received thousands of dollars in support over the past year. Housing, transportation, medical coordination, staff supervision. You have her cleaning floors, light housekeeping. Calla almost laughed, not because it was funny, because it was insulting. She's recovering from kidney failure. She's contributing to her own care. By scrubbing marble on her knees? Fleming's expression hardened for the first time, only slightly. Enough. We've done more for Opal than most facilities would have. There it was. The thing rich people sometimes said when they wanted gratitude for basic decency. Calla had heard versions of it her whole life. We gave them a chance, we helped them, we carried them, as if kindness became ownership, as if money created permission. She stepped closer. My mother isn't your employee, no. Then she's leaving. Fleming folded his gloves carefully. That would be unfortunate. The words landed wrong. Not sad, threatening. Calla felt it immediately. So would forgery. The property manager's eyes widened. Fleming looked at him, just one glance. The man lowered his gaze instantly. Another answer, another piece. Someone in this house was afraid of Fleming. The question was how many. Calla took the folder. These papers are coming with me. No. The response came instantly, not polite this time, not controlled, just sharp. No, those are estate documents. My signature is on them. They belong to Ashford House. Calla stared at him, then calmly pulled out her phone. She photographed every page, every signature, every date, every clause. Fleming watched. His jaw tightened. Good. Let him be uncomfortable, for once. When she finished, she closed the folder and placed it on the desk. I have copies now. For the first time since arriving, she saw genuine irritation cross his face. Not anger, concern, small but real, which meant the documents mattered. Far more than he wanted her to believe. A few minutes later, Calla helped Opal sit at the kitchen table. The older woman looked exhausted, as though the conversation alone had drained what little energy remained. Calla poured water into a glass and placed it in front of her. You need to come home. Opal stared into the water. I don't think I can. You absolutely can. They'll come after you. Who? Opal looked toward the hallway again. Always the hallway, always the study. They don't like problems. Calla sat down across from her. Mom, listen to me. Opal finally met her eyes. I never signed anything. The old woman blinked. What? I never approved this arrangement. The words hung there, heavy, important. Opal looked genuinely confused, not skeptical. Confused. Like someone trying to reconcile two realities at once. But Fleming showed me the paperwork. He lied. Opal swallowed. He said you were overwhelmed. No. He said the business came first. No. He said I was becoming expensive. Calla's chest tightened. That one hurt. Because it was personal. Because someone had chosen those exact words, knowing how deeply they would cut. No, Calla repeated softly. For several seconds neither woman spoke. Then Opal covered her face with both hands. Not crying, just tired, profoundly tired, the kind of tired that came from carrying fear too long. I knew something felt wrong, she whispered. Calla moved beside her. What do you mean? Opal hesitated, then spoke carefully. Every time I asked to call you, there was a reason I couldn't. Calla froze. When? A lot. How many times? I don't know. A cold feeling moved through her stomach. Did they stop you? Opal lowered her hands. They always had an explanation. No answer would have frightened Calla more. Because manipulation rarely announced itself, it disguised itself as concern, timing, convenience, procedures, rules. The more Opal talked, the worse it became. Calls delayed. Letters supposedly mailed, messages never returned, appointments rescheduled, weeks disappearing, all explained away, one reasonable excuse at a time. By themselves, each incident sounded harmless. Together, they looked deliberate. Calla suddenly understood something terrifying. This wasn't neglect. Neglect was carelessness. Someone had been paying attention. Someone had been managing information. That required effort, planning, intent. Fleming, the realization settled over her like ice. A knock interrupted her thoughts. The property manager stood awkwardly in the doorway. Mr. Brist would like a word before you leave. No. The man blinked. What? I said no. He looked genuinely surprised. Apparently people usually obeyed requests around here. Calla stood. If Mr. Brist wants something, he can wait. The man hesitated, then nodded and retreated. Opal stared at her. A faint smile appeared for the first time all day. Tiny, fragile, but real. You always were stubborn. Calla smiled back. I learned from somebody. For a moment things felt almost normal. Then she remembered the inventory tag. The one beside the study door, her mother's name. A 20-year-old tag attached to a room nobody was allowed to enter. Nothing about that made sense. She stood again. Mom. The smile disappeared immediately. You know what's in that room? It wasn't a question. Opal's eyes filled with panic. No, don't. You looked at the tag. Calla. Why is your name on it? Opal stood too quickly. The chair scraped backward. Fear flooded her face again. Not ordinary fear, not embarrassment. Something older, deeper. The kind people carried for decades. You have to leave it alone. Why? Because some doors should stay closed. Not when someone is using them to control you. Opal shook her head desperately. You don't understand. Then help me. A long silence followed. The kitchen clock ticked. Outside, wind rattled the bare branches against the windows. Finally, Opal whispered something so quietly, Calla almost missed it. I worked in that room. Calla's pulse jumped. What? Years ago. The answer raised 100 new questions. Before she could ask any of them, Opal continued. I filed documents there. When? Opal looked toward the study. I was 22. Calla's breath caught. That inventory card suddenly made sense. At least part of it. Not because Opal belonged to the room. Because she had once belonged to whatever secrets it held. Then Opal said the words that changed everything. There was another woman. Calla went still. What woman? Opal stared at the floor. Her hands trembled. For several seconds she seemed unable to speak. When she finally did, her voice barely rose above a whisper. Her name was Journey Halstead. The name meant nothing to Calla. Yet the moment it left Opal's lips, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Someone had spent years making sure nobody talked about that woman anymore. The name lingered in the kitchen long after Opal stopped speaking. Journey Halstead. Calla repeated it silently, trying to place it somewhere in memory. A client, a contractor, a neighbor. Anything. Nothing came. Yet Opal's reaction made one thing obvious. This was not some forgotten employee from decades ago. This was a wound, a deep one. Outside, a car door slammed somewhere near the front drive. Both women flinched. Opal immediately looked toward the windows. Fear again. Always fear. Calla was beginning to hate it. "'Tis Fleming coming back in?" she asked. "I don't know." "Good." Opal stared at her. Calla stood and gathered the photographs she had taken from the agreement. Then she opened her email and uploaded every image to 3 separate cloud accounts. If something happened to her phone, the evidence would survive. If Fleming somehow gained access to her device, the evidence would survive. The action calmed her, a little, because it was something, a step forward, a choice. Opal watched quietly. "You always do that." "Do what?" "Prepare for the worst." Calla smiled faintly. "You taught me." For a moment neither spoke. Then Calla sat back down. "Tell me about Journey." The color left Opal's face again. Not panic this time, sadness. Old sadness. The kind that had settled into the bones. "I haven't said her name out loud in years." "Then start there." Opal looked down at her hands. "When I first came to Ashford House, I didn't know anybody." Her voice was soft, measured, like someone testing whether memories were still safe to touch. "I was 22, broke, desperate for work." Calla listened carefully. Everything mattered now, every detail. Journey was already here. Working for the family. Opal nodded. She handled records filing, estate paperwork, the inventory tag, the study. Calla immediately saw the connection. "That's where you met her." "Yes." A long silence followed. Then Opal surprised her. She was funny. The answer felt strangely human, not dramatic, not mysterious, just real. Funny, very. For the first time since arriving at Ashford House, Opal smiled. A genuine smile. Brief, gone almost immediately, but real. She made fun of rich people. Calla laughed despite everything. "I think I'd have liked her. You would have." The words came too quickly. Too certainly. Calla noticed. Opal noticed that Calla noticed. Neither addressed it. Not yet. The kitchen suddenly felt smaller, the secrets closer. Then what happened? Opal's smile vanished. Something changed. How? I don't know exactly. Calla wasn't sure she believed that. Not completely. But she stayed quiet. Opal continued. Journey started spending more time in the West study. That room again. Everything pointed back there. Everything working at first. Then, she started looking for something. Calla leaned forward. What? I never knew. The answer sounded truthful, frustrating, but truthful. Did Fleming know her? Opal shook her head. Know his father? A pause. Long enough. Yes, Calla noticed that hesitation immediately. There it was. A name still missing from the story. A person hiding in the shadows behind Fleming. the generation before him, the one that had built whatever secret was buried inside Ashford House. Journey became scared, Opal said quietly. When, near the end, the phrase caught Calla's attention. Near the end. Not before she quit, not before she left, near the end, as if Opal already knew there had been one. What do you mean? Opal stared at the table. She started keeping copies. Copies of what? Documents. A chill ran through Calla. Now they were getting somewhere. What kind of documents? I never saw them, Mom, I didn't. The frustration in her voice sounded genuine. I asked. She wouldn't show me. Calla leaned back, thinking copies, estate records, a woman searching for something, a locked study, a missing name, and now a wealthy family that seemed desperate to keep the room closed. The pieces didn't fit yet, but they were starting to touch. A sound came from the hallway, footsteps, the property manager again. This time he looked even more nervous. Miss Pruitt? Calla stood immediately. What now? The man swallowed. Mr. Brist has left. Good. But before he left, he requested all staff secure the West study. Calla exchanged a look with Opal. Requested, not ordered. Interesting. Why? The manager hesitated. Too long. Estate protocol. That's not an answer. His eyes drifted toward the hallway, toward the study, then back. I don't know anything. Another lie. Not a good one. Calla had spent years working around people protecting secrets. This man knew something, maybe not everything, but something. When he left again, she followed him into the hallway. The study door stood exactly where it had before, silent, locked, watching. The inventory tag remained attached beside the brass handle. Calla stepped closer. Years of estate work had trained her to notice details other people ignored. Labels, numbers, dates, inventory systems, patterns. The tag contained more than a name, much more. At the bottom was a faded handwritten notation. Archive transfer, Oct. 1993. Calla froze. October 1993. A date. Finally. Something concrete. Something that could be checked. She pulled out her phone and photographed the tag. Twice. Then zoomed in. Below the date was another line, almost invisible from age. Initial review, JH Journey Halstead. Her pulse quickened. For the first time she had physical evidence that Journey had worked directly inside that room, not just a story. Evidence, and someone had left it there. Why? Calla looked at the lock, old brass, heavy, expensive, yet strangely newer than the surrounding hardware, as though it had been replaced years after the rest of the house. Another detail, another question, then she noticed something else. Tiny, almost hidden beneath the edge of the inventory card. A folded piece of paper, wedged between the tag and the wall. Her heart jumped. Carefully she slid it free. The paper was yellow with age, no larger than a receipt. Folded twice, someone had hidden it deliberately. Not well enough to survive inspection, but well enough to survive neglect. Calla unfolded it slowly. One sentence, that was all, written in faded blue ink. If anything happens to me, the copies are not in the study. Calla stared. Read it again. Then a third time, not in the study, meaning someone had expected people to search there, meaning the study was a distraction, or only part of the truth. Footsteps sounded suddenly behind her. She turned. Opal stood in the hallway. The moment her eyes landed on the note, all remaining color vanished from her face. She whispered one word. Not Fleming, not Ashford, not study Journey. Then Opal looked directly at the handwriting and said something that made every hair on Calla's arms stand up. I know exactly when she wrote that. Opal's eyes never left the note. The hallway seemed to disappear around her. The locked study, the faded wallpaper, the distant sounds of workers moving through Ashford House, all of it faded beneath the weight of a memory she had spent years trying to bury. Calla folded the paper carefully. Then tell me. Opal swallowed. Journey wrote that the week before she vanished. Calla's pulse quickened. You saw her write it? Opal nodded. We were in the records room downstairs. She was copying documents again. What documents? I still didn't know. The frustration hit Calla immediately. Every answer opened another door. Every door revealed 3 more. Mom, if she trusted you, I know. Opal's voice cracked. I know what you're thinking. Calla softened. For the first time she saw how exhausted Opal looked. Not physically, emotionally. A person carrying a secret for decades eventually became part of the secret itself. You don't have to protect everyone anymore. Opal closed her eyes. When she opened them again, something had changed. A decision, a surrender. Journey was afraid of Harlan Brist. That name again, not Fleming, his father. The man behind the estate before Fleming inherited control. Why, I never knew the whole story. But enough. Opal nodded. Enough. They moved back into the kitchen where no one could overhear them. Calla locked the door, a small action, a deliberate one. Protecting Opal now felt more important than protecting the mystery. Opal stared out the window. Journey told me Harlan had made promises he couldn't afford to keep. What kind of promises? Financial ones. Calla immediately thought about the voided check from the hidden envelope. Money, trusts, records. The same pattern kept repeating. To Journey? Yes. Why? Opal shook her head. I never asked. That answer sounded strange. But Calla understood. Poor people working inside wealthy homes often learned not to ask questions, especially when their jobs depended on silence. One night she came to my apartment. The memory seemed painfully clear. She brought a box. Calla leaned forward. A box, small, metal, about this wide. Opal held her hands apart. She told me if anything happened, someone would eventually come looking. Someone? A pause. Then another. I thought she meant a lawyer. But now? Opal looked directly at Calla. Now I'm not sure. Silence settled between them. Calla could feel the shape of something larger emerging. Something that had existed long before Fleming ever entered the picture. A hidden conflict, a buried deal, a missing woman, and somehow her own life sat in the center of it. The realization left her uneasy, not excited, uneasy. Because if Journey had disappeared over this, what exactly had Fleming become willing to do to keep it buried? A knock interrupted the moment, sharp, unexpected. Both women jumped. Calla moved first. The property manager stood outside, nervous again, always nervous. There's someone here asking for you. For me? He nodded. He says he's from the county records office. Calla exchanged a look with Opal. Neither had contacted anyone there. Not yet. What's his name? The manager checked a card. Harold Finch. The name meant nothing, but the timing felt wrong. Too wrong. Still, Calla followed him toward the front hall. A man in his 60s waited near the entrance. Suit, briefcase, county identification badge, professional, calm, but there was tension behind his eyes. The look of someone who had driven somewhere because waiting had become impossible. Miss Pruitt? Yes. My name is Harold Finch. He extended his hand. She shook it. I work in records preservation for Chester County. What can I do for you? His gaze shifted briefly toward the staircase, toward the study wing, then back. I heard someone requested archived estate files connected to Ashford House. Calla immediately stiffened. I haven't filed anything yet, I know. The answer surprised her. Harold looked uncomfortable, as if he were deciding how much to say. Finally he lowered his voice. You should be careful. Every alarm in Calla's head went off. Why? Because certain records disappeared before. The hallway suddenly felt colder. What records? A lot of them. His expression darkened. Too many. Calla studied him carefully. This wasn't gossip. This wasn't speculation. This was someone who had seen something. What are you telling me? Harold took a slow breath. About 15 years ago, I was helping digitize older estate documents. He opened his briefcase, pulled out a folder. I wasn't supposed to keep copies. Calla's heart began pounding, but I did. He handed her a single photocopied page, old, yellowed, partially faded. Across the top sat an estate reference number. Ashford Holdings Trust Review. The date stunned her, October 1993. The same month from the study inventory tag. The same month Journey disappeared. Calla looked lower. Several names appeared. Most meant nothing. One did, Journey Halstead. Another did, Harlan Brist. Then she saw a third. Her breath caught. Opal Pruitt. What is this? Harold glanced around the hallway, making sure they were alone. It's one page from a file that vanished. Vanished? It was requested. By who? He hesitated. I don't know. The answer sounded truthful, but incomplete. Calla looked back at the page. Most of it referenced trust assets and review schedules. Nothing dramatic, nothing obvious. Then she saw a handwritten note near the bottom margin. Different ink, different handwriting, added later one sentence. Beneficiary identity pending confirmation. Calla stared. Beneficiary? Harold nodded slowly. That's why I came. The heir seemed to leave the room. What are you saying? I don't know who the beneficiary was. His answer was careful, professional, but somebody spent years making sure that file disappeared. Calla felt the floor shift beneath her, not physically, emotionally. This was bigger than missing documents, bigger than unpaid labor, bigger than forged signatures. Someone had hidden an entire trust review, and Journey Halstead's name had been sitting inside it. Harold took a business card from his pocket. If you're going to pursue this, talk to Waverley Ott. Calla recognized the name instantly, the retired estate attorney from Opal's story. Why her? Harold's expression tightened. Because she's the only person I know who fought the Brists and survived it. Then he turned and walked toward the door. Wait. He stopped. There was something else. Harold looked back. The missing file wasn't the only thing removed. Calla felt her stomach knot. What else was missing? His face had gone pale. The beneficiary page. And before Calla could ask another question, he added one final sentence. The last person documented as viewing that page was Journey Halstead. Calla stood frozen in the entrance hall long after Harold Finch had left. The beneficiary page, not missing by accident, removed, targeted. Someone had known exactly which piece of paper mattered most. When she finally looked down at the photocopy again, her hands were trembling. The faded trust review meant more now than it had 5 minutes earlier. It wasn't proof. Not yet. But it was evidence that someone had spent years controlling what could and could not be found. And people only worked that hard when they were afraid of the truth. Opal was waiting in the kitchen when Calla returned. One look at her face was enough. What happened? Calla handed her the photocopy. Opal adjusted her glasses and read silently. The color drained from her face. Oh no, you've seen this before, it wasn't a question. Opal sat down slowly. Her breathing had become shallow. Calla immediately regretted pushing. But they were too far into this now. Too much had already been hidden, Mom. Opal closed her eyes. I saw that trust review once. The answer landed like a hammer. When? Years ago. How many years? I don't remember exactly. Calla stared. You remember? A long silence. Then Opal nodded. 22 years ago. Calla pulled out a chair and sat across from her. Tell me. Opal folded her hands together. I wasn't supposed to see it. How did you? Journey showed it to me. That name changed everything every time it appeared. Even now. Especially now. What did she say? Opal swallowed. She told me someone was lying. Calla leaned forward. About what? The trust. Another piece. Another fragment. Never enough to see the whole picture. Journey had known something. She had discovered something. And whatever it was had frightened her. Did she tell you who the beneficiary was? Opal immediately looked away. The reaction was answer enough. She knew more, a lot more, Mom. I don't know for certain. That's not what I asked. Opal's eyes filled. For a moment she looked exhausted. Not elderly, not weak. Just tired of carrying a burden that had outlived half her life. Journey believed the beneficiary wasn't who the Brists claimed. The room went silent. Calla's mind raced. Not who the Brists claimed. Meaning there had been another name. Another identity, another version of the story, and somebody had rewritten it. Did Journey have proof? Opal hesitated, then nodded. She thought she did. Where? The metal box. Calla's pulse jumped. The box again. The same box Journey had supposedly left behind. The same box that had vanished. Where did it go? I don't know. You never opened it? I promised her I wouldn't. The answer sounded sincere, painfully sincere. Calla believed her. That was the problem. Opal had spent her life keeping promises, even promises that hurt her, even promises that left her carrying secrets alone. Calla stood and paced toward the window. Outside, workers were loading debris into dumpsters. Ashford House looked different now. Not abandoned, not mysterious. Predatory, like a machine that had quietly consumed people for decades. Her phone buzzed, unknown number. She almost ignored it, then answered. Calla Pruitt, a woman's voice responded. Calm, older. Sharp. Mr. Finch told me you might call. Calla stopped moving. Waverley Ott? Yes, the retired estate attorney, the woman Harold Finch had specifically named. Calla glanced at Opal. Opal immediately recognized the name. Her expression changed. Fear, recognition, relief all at once. I'd like to meet you, Waverley said. When today? Calla checked the clock. That's fast, it needs to be. The answer carried weight. The kind of weight that came from experience. What aren't you telling me? A pause. Then Waverley spoke carefully. Fleming Brist requested access to several archived trust records yesterday. Calla's stomach tightened. Yesterday, before Harold arrived, before she even knew the beneficiary page existed. What records? The same trust records you're asking about. The room suddenly felt smaller. He knows, he suspects. What's the difference? Not much. Calla closed her eyes. Of course Fleming knew something was happening. People like him didn't stay powerful by being surprised. Waverley continued. If he becomes certain that specific documents still exist, they'll disappear. The words landed hard. Not because they sounded dramatic, because they sounded practical, matter of fact. Like something she had already seen happen before. "Where do we meet?" "My office." "I thought you retired." "I did." The faintest trace of amusement entered the older woman's voice. But retirement becomes flexible when old ghosts start walking again. The call ended. An hour later, Calla drove into Westchester. She left Opal at home with strict instructions not to answer unknown calls and not to open the door for anyone. For the first time since this nightmare began, she felt like someone was watching them, not physically, strategically, the way a chess player watches a board, several moves ahead. Waverly's office occupied the second floor of an old brick building near the courthouse. The woman who greeted her looked exactly like someone who had spent 40 years arguing with wealthy men, and winning often enough to keep going. White hair, sharp eyes, no wasted movements, no wasted words. She invited Calla inside and closed the door, then locked it. The sound seemed unusually loud. Waverly noticed good habit. Calla sat. Waverly remained standing. "You found the envelope." "It wasn't a question, yes." "And Opal is alive." Another statement, not a question, yes. Waverly nodded slowly. "As far as miracles go, that's already more than I expected." Calla frowned. "What does that mean?" For the first time, Waverly seemed genuinely sad. "Because when Journey disappeared, I assumed Opal wouldn't survive long either." The sentence hit harder than Calla expected. Not because it was cruel, because it sounded honest. "What happened?" Waverly opened a file drawer, removed a thick folder, set it on the desk. The folder looked old, handled many times, protected carefully, waiting. "For 31 years I've kept copies." Calla stared. "Copies of what?" "Everything I legally could." The folder opened. Inside sat letters, trust documents, correspondence, photographs, not family photographs, professional ones, estate records, staff records, meeting schedules, paper trails, a life preserved through paperwork. Waverly slid one document forward. The date was October 1993. Calla immediately recognized the handwriting. The same handwriting from the hidden envelope, Harlan Brist. At the bottom sat a signature. And below it, one sentence. "If beneficiary verification becomes impossible, preserve all records relating to Journey Halstead." Calla looked up. Why would he write that? Waverly held her gaze. Because by then he knew someone inside his own family was destroying evidence. The room became perfectly still, not suspicion, not theory, not rumor. Someone, inside the family, destroying evidence. Deliberately, systematically, for years. Calla looked down again, then noticed something she had missed. Attached to the back of the document was a clipped note, small, yellow, handwritten, different ink, different person, 3 words only, check hospital archive. Calla's pulse began hammering. She looked up. What hospital? Waverly's expression darkened. That's exactly the question Journey was trying to answer before she vanished. Calla stared at the yellow note for several seconds. Check hospital archive, 3 words, nothing more, no hospital name, no explanation, no signature. Just a direction left behind by someone who had clearly believed the answer existed somewhere else. Not in Ashford House, not in the trust file, not in the missing beneficiary page. Somewhere beyond them. Waverly carefully returned the document to its folder. Journey wrote notes like that when she was building a timeline. A timeline of what? Whatever frightened her enough to start collecting evidence. Calla leaned back. And she never told you? Waverly's expression hardened. She tried. The answer caught Calla off guard. Tried? Waverly nodded. 3 days before she disappeared, the room went quiet. For the first time, someone was talking about Journey's final days as if they had actually been there. Not as a rumor, not as a mystery, as a real person moving through real events. What happened? Waverly folded her hands. She came into this office carrying a cardboard file box. Calla immediately thought of the metal box Opal had mentioned. Different box, different day. Another layer. She said she'd found something. What? I never learned. Waverly's frustration still sounded fresh. She refused to tell me until she confirmed it. Confirmed what? That the records matched. Calla felt a chill move through her. Records, hospital records, trust records, estate records. Every road kept pointing toward paperwork, toward documents, toward things people had tried very hard to erase. What happened after that? She never came back. The words landed heavily. No drama, no exaggeration, just absence. A woman had walked out of this office and disappeared from history. and now Calla was following the same trail. Waverley stood and crossed the room. She opened a cabinet and removed another folder. This one looked newer, less worn. She handed it over. Read the first page. Calla opened it. The document was a property transfer summary. Ashford House, trust holdings, estate assets. Most of it looked routine. Then she reached the attached notes. Several properties connected to the Brist family had changed ownership within a 6-month period. Unusual, but not shocking. Then she noticed the dates: October 1993, November 1993, December 1993. Immediately after Journey vanished, immediately before Harlan Brist died. Calla looked up. What am I seeing? Waverley pointed toward one address. A small medical facility outside Chester County. The name meant nothing to Calla until she saw the description. Closed in 1998, records transferred, archive location unknown. Her pulse quickened. The hospital, possibly. Journey was looking there. I believe so. Calla lowered her eyes back to the page. A facility, records transferred, archive unknown, a dead end, or maybe not. What happened to the records after the hospital closed? Waverley shook her head. No one knows. Someone must know. Not officially. The distinction mattered. Calla understood that immediately. Officially lost did not always mean actually lost. It often meant hidden, or forgotten, or intentionally ignored. Her phone vibrated. She glanced at the screen. One of her employees. Megan. She almost declined the call, then answered. Everything okay? The silence on the other end lasted 2 seconds too long. No. Calla stood immediately. What happened? Megan sounded shaken. Someone was at the office. The blood drained from Calla's face. What do you mean, a man? Who? I don't know. Waverley stopped moving, listening. Megan continued. He wasn't a client. What did he want? He asked questions about old inventory reports. Calla's stomach tightened. Not current jobs, not invoices, inventory reports. Specifically the thing that had uncovered the envelope. What kind of questions? He wanted access to archived files. Calla's heart began pounding. Did he get any? No. Good. But that's not all. Calla closed her eyes. Of course it wasn't. Megan lowered her voice. He knew your mother's name. The room seemed to tilt. What? He asked whether Opal Pruitt had ever been listed on any Ashford House inventories. Waverley cursed under her breath. The first time Calla had heard her do so. Did he leave a name? No description? Mid-50s, grey suit. Calla immediately thought of Fleming, but it didn't fit. Too careless. Too visible. Fleming used lawyers, paperwork, distance, not random office visits unless someone was working for him, which might be worse. Calla ended the call. The room felt different now. Smaller. The timeline had accelerated. Someone was searching. Someone knew enough to be dangerous. Waverley walked back to her desk. We're out of time. What does that mean? It means Fleming has realized something survived. Calla didn't like the certainty in her voice. You don't know that. I do. How? Waverley looked directly at her. Because this is exactly how it started 30 years ago. The answer silenced the room. Waverley pulled open another drawer. Inside sat several sealed envelopes, each carefully labeled, each dated. Prepared, waiting. For years you expected this. I hoped I was wrong. Calla stared. What are those? Copies of what? Everything I couldn't trust other people to protect. The statement landed harder than any dramatic revelation could have. For 3 decades, this woman had quietly preserved evidence because she believed someone would eventually need it. Someone. Maybe Journey. Maybe Opal. Maybe whoever the missing beneficiary turned out to be. Maybe Calla. Waverley selected one envelope and slid it across the desk. Take this. Calla looked down. The label contained a single handwritten name. Journey Halstead. Nothing else. What is it? I don't know. You've never opened it? No, why not? Waverley's answer came immediately. Because it wasn't mine. Calla slowly picked it up. The envelope felt heavier than it should. Not physically, emotionally. 3 decades of silence sat inside. 3 decades of waiting. 3 decades of fear. Her fingers moved toward the seal, then stopped. Waverley's phone rang. The older woman glanced at the caller ID. Her face changed instantly, not fear. Alarm. Real alarm, she answered. Listened. Said nothing, then ended the call. What happened? Waverley looked at Calla. For a moment she seemed older, tired. The way people looked when a nightmare they thought was buried suddenly stood up again. That hospital archive. Calla stood. What about it? It wasn't lost. Every nerve in her body tightened. What? Waverley swallowed. It was found. Hope flared. For exactly 1 second. Then Waverley continued, "This morning, the hope vanished because she already knew what came next. Someone had found it before they did." "Who?" Waverley's eyes locked onto hers. "The transfer request was signed yesterday." A pause, one heartbeat, then another, and finally the name, Fleming Brist. Nobody spoke for several seconds after Waverley said the name. Fleming Brist, the man who had controlled Opal's housing, her paperwork, her access to Calla, and nearly every obstacle they had encountered. Now he was reaching for hospital archives. Calla felt a cold pressure settle behind her ribs. It was not panic, it was certainty. He was no longer reacting to discoveries. He was chasing the same truth they were. The difference was that he wanted it gone. "When can we get there?" she asked. Waverley answered immediately. "Tonight." Calla blinked. "Tonight? If records still exist, every hour matters." The older attorney began gathering folders. She moved with surprising speed, not because she was calm, because she had seen this happen before. Calla recognized the look now. Someone preparing for a fire before smoke appeared. An hour later they were driving west through steady rain. The road stretched through dark Pennsylvania farmland, while headlights cut through the mist. Neither woman spoke much. The silence was crowded enough. Calla kept thinking about Opal, about the way her mother had scrubbed floors for leftovers, about the forged paperwork, about 30 years of fear. And now another realization hurt almost as much. Journey had been running toward evidence before she disappeared, not away from it. Calla had imagined a missing woman swallowed by mystery. Now she was beginning to see someone determined, someone gathering proof, someone who may have gotten too close. Her phone buzzed. A text from Opal, just 4 words. "Be careful." "Please, Calla." The message tightened her throat. She typed back immediately, "I will, I promise." The reply never came. The rain intensified. 2 hours later they arrived at a former record storage facility outside Lancaster County. The building looked ordinary, a converted warehouse surrounded by chain-link fencing. Nothing about it suggested secrets worth destroying. Yet the parking lot contained 3 vehicles despite the late hour. Waverley noticed them too. "Someone's here." Calla's pulse quickened. One vehicle belonged to the archive company. Another appeared to be a maintenance truck. The third was a black SUV, expensive, new, familiar. Calla had seen a nearly identical vehicle parked at Ashford House. Neither woman said the obvious. They simply got out and walked toward the entrance. Inside, a tired night supervisor sat behind a desk. He looked surprised to see visitors, then concerned when Waverley introduced herself. "We need to review records transferred from St. Agnes Recovery Center." The man's expression changed immediately. Recognition. Not confusion, recognition. Calla noticed it, so did Waverley. The supervisor glanced toward a hallway, then back at them. "You aren't the first people asking." "Who else asked?" Waverley said. The man hesitated. A legal professional would have stopped there, would have demanded paperwork, would have protected confidentiality. Instead, he lowered his voice. "A representative, from whom he said he was acting on behalf of a private estate." Calla already knew. The supervisor continued. "He arrived this afternoon. Did he access anything?" "Some records. How many?" "I don't know." That answer felt honest, not evasive. Worse, because it meant real access had already happened. Waverley produced identification and several legal documents. The supervisor reviewed them carefully. Finally he nodded. "Come with me." The archive occupied a massive climate-controlled room. Shelves stretched in every direction, thousands of boxes, decades of forgotten paperwork, lives reduced to labels. Dates, numbers. Calla followed the supervisor toward a section marked medical transfers. The farther they walked, the worse the feeling became. Someone had been here recently. Several boxes sat open. Files lay stacked on a rolling cart. A chair remained pulled away from a table. The scene looked abandoned mid-search, not organized, rushed, desperate. The supervisor frowned. That wasn't like this earlier. Waverley exchanged a glance with Calla. Both understood. Someone had gone through records quickly, looking for something specific. The supervisor checked a sign-out log, then froze. "What is it?" Calla asked. He pointed. A single archive box number had been removed from inventory, not borrowed, removed. The paperwork listed a transfer authorization, signed, approved, released, yesterday. Calla looked at the authorization line. Her stomach dropped. The signature belonged to Fleming Brist, but something else caught her eye. The box description. Personnel files, staff medical records, Ashford House employees. Journey's name might have been inside. Opals too. Maybe dozens of others. Gone. The supervisor looked pale. That box shouldn't have been released. Waverley's voice sharpened. Why? Because part of the transfer restriction required dual approval. Which means, the man swallowed. It means someone bypassed procedure. Silence followed. Not a mistake, not confusion. Someone had intentionally pushed records out before anyone else could see them. Calla felt anger surge through her. Not reckless anger, focused anger. The kind that sharpened every thought. Is there a copy? The supervisor hesitated. Maybe. The most dangerous word in the world. He led them deeper into the archive. A secondary storage section. Microfilm records. Digital conversion backups. Things forgotten when people concentrated on paper. For nearly an hour they searched. Nothing. Then another dead end. Then another. Midnight passed. The supervisor was preparing to apologize when Calla noticed a small notation on an index sheet. A reference code. Different from every other entry. What does this mean? The man leaned closer. His eyes widened. I forgot about that. Forgot what? He pointed toward the notation, duplicate preservation file. Waverley straightened. What? The supervisor nodded. Certain records were copied when facilities closed. Calla's heart began hammering. Where? Off-site. Of course. Another obstacle, another layer, another door. But at least it existed. The supervisor accessed an old database. His fingers moved quickly across the keyboard, then stopped. His face lost color again. Calla was beginning to hate that expression. What now? The man stared at the screen, then slowly turned it toward them. The preservation file still existed, but it was no longer available. Status changed. Restricted, updated 48 hours ago. Requesting authority listed below. Calla already knew whose name she would see. But she was wrong. It wasn't Fleming. The authorization belonged to someone else. Someone they had never encountered before. Someone with enough authority to lock medical archives tied to Journey Halstead. Calla read the name twice, then a third time, because it made no sense. The name matched a person listed in Journey's old trust papers. A person everyone had assumed was dead. A person whose signature should not have existed. Waverley stared at the screen. For the first time since Calla had met her, she looked genuinely shaken. No, she whispered. The supervisor looked between them. You know this person? Waverley didn't answer. Calla couldn't, because the name glowing on the monitor changed everything they thought they understood about Journey's disappearance. The access authorization read, authorized by J. Halstead. I've continued the story in the direction implied by your last chapter's cliffhanger, that the J. Halstead authorization may not mean Journey is alive, but that someone deliberately used her identity. Since you're asking for chapter text to continue editing publishing, I'm providing it in a writing block. Calla stared at the monitor until the letters blurred. Authorized by J. Halstead. The name seemed impossible. Journey Halstead had vanished more than 30 years earlier. Every document they had found pointed to a woman whose trail had ended without explanation. Yet her name had appeared on a modern authorization entered only 48 hours ago. The archive supervisor shifted uneasily. Is something wrong? Waverley recovered first. Can you print everything connected to that authorization? The man nodded. A few moments later, sheets of paper slid from a nearby printer. Calla grabbed them before they had fully settled into the tray. The authorization number was real. The access request was real. The restriction order was real. But something immediately felt wrong. The signature field wasn't handwritten. It was a digital credential, generated through an estate records portal. Someone had not physically appeared and signed Journey's name. Someone had logged into a system and used credentials attached to her identity. That changed everything, and nothing. It doesn't prove she's alive, Waverley said quietly. Calla looked up. You think it's fraud? I think someone wanted us to think less carefully. Waverley scanned the pages again. Then her eyes narrowed. There, Calla followed her finger, a secondary contact field. Small, almost hidden. The name listed beneath the authorization wasn't Journey Halstead. It was someone else, a trustee representative. The line had been partially redacted, but not completely. Enough remained visible. Enough to matter. The surname was Brist. For a second, neither woman moved. Then Calla laughed once, not because anything was funny. Because she suddenly felt exhausted. Every road kept leading back to the same family. Every hidden door opened into another brisk hallway. The archive supervisor checked his watch. I shouldn't be telling you this, but whoever submitted the restriction order called twice. When? Waverley asked. Yesterday. Then again this morning. What did they want? Confirmation that the preservation file had been locked. Calla felt her jaw tighten. That meant Fleming or someone connected to him had known exactly where to look. Not eventually, immediately, almost as if they had been monitoring the same records for years. Waverley requested copies of everything. The supervisor agreed. By the time they left the building, it was nearly 2 a.m. Rain still fell across the empty parking lot. Calla stood beside her truck while Waverley organized the documents into folders. You're thinking about something? Waverley didn't answer immediately. Finally, she closed the folder. Journey's disappearance. What about it? For years, everyone assumed the important question was where she went. Calla waited. Waverley looked toward the dark road. I think the more important question may be who benefited from her being gone. The drive back felt longer. Neither woman slept. By sunrise, they were seated inside Waverley's office reviewing timelines spread across a conference table. Trust documents, payroll records, hospital transfers, estate inventories, mail redirection forms, everything they had gathered. The pattern became clearer and uglier. Journey disappeared, the trust became dormant, records scattered, employees left, certain files vanished. Then decades later, just as Ashford House prepared for sale, Fleming suddenly began tightening control over Opal. Not before, not years earlier, recently, that timing mattered. Calla stared at the calendar. What changed? Waverley pointed to a property report. This. The report estimated the value of Ashford House and its surrounding land after redevelopment. The number was enormous, far beyond what Calla had imagined. Enough money to make old secrets dangerous again. Enough money to motivate desperate decisions. Enough money to convince someone that destroying evidence was worth the risk. A knock interrupted them. Waverley's assistant entered carrying a small package, no return address. Calla felt immediate unease. The package was addressed to her, not Waverley, not the office, her. The box was plain cardboard, nothing unusual, yet the room felt colder as she opened it. Inside was a single photograph, no note, no explanation, just a photograph. Calla carefully lifted it from the box. The image appeared old, taken inside Ashford House decades earlier. Several adult staff members stood together near the west study. Opal was there, much younger. Journey was there too. Calla recognized her from employment records and identification files, but neither woman was what caught her attention. There was a man standing beside Journey, tall, well-dressed. His arm rested lightly against the back of her chair, not possessive, protective. The photograph had been folded for years. A crease ran directly through his face. Someone had intentionally damaged that section. Calla turned the image toward Waverley. The attorney inhaled sharply. You know him, it wasn't a question. Waverley nodded. Slowly, reluctantly, yes, who is he? For a moment Waverley looked older than Calla had ever seen her. Not tired, burdened. Finally she answered. Harlan Brist. The name landed heavily. Harlan, the deceased family patriarch. The man who had created the trust. The man whose documents kept surfacing throughout the investigation. Calla looked again at the photograph. Harlan and Journey stood close, closer than employer and employee. Closer than strangers, a possibility formed, dangerous, complicated, potentially explosive. Waverley must have seen it forming because she spoke immediately. Don't jump to conclusions you already have. Silence. That silence was answer enough. Calla lowered her eyes to the photograph again. Then she noticed something else, something even stranger. Written across the back in faded blue ink was a date, and beneath it, a short message. The handwriting matched Journey's letters. Calla knew because she had spent hours studying them. The note read, If anything happens to me, the truth is in the second file. Her pulse accelerated. The second file? Waverley took the photograph, examined the back, then froze, not at the message, at something written underneath it, words almost erased by time. Words neither of them had dosed at first. A file number, an archive reference, a specific storage designation, not from Ashford House, not from county probate records, not from any location they had searched. The reference belonged to a private trust repository, one that should have been inaccessible without trustee authorization. Calla looked up. Can we get it? Waverley didn't answer right away. When she finally spoke, her voice was grim. Maybe. Maybe isn't no. Then what's the problem? Waverley met her eyes. According to these codes, whoever accessed that repository last did so 3 days ago. The room became silent, because they both understood what that meant. Someone else had already found the second file, and there was only one person either of them believed desperate enough to reach it first. Fleming Brist. The second file changed everything. It did not contain a confession. It did not contain a dramatic secret that solved the case overnight. Instead, it contained what real investigations often depended on: years of records that finally fit together. Over the next several weeks, Waverley's team worked through every document. The inventory log from Ashford House confirmed exactly when the hidden envelope had been discovered. The trust records matched Harlan Brist's original instructions. Bank statements showed repeated withdrawals from Opal's account labeled as care fees. Mail forwarding forms proved her correspondence had been redirected. Medical access requests showed how her contact with the outside world had been restricted. Separately, the adult DNA review and certified adoption records were examined through the proper channels. No single document won the case. Together, they told the truth. The probate review took time. Fleming fought every step. He insisted Calla had manipulated the evidence. He claimed Journey's records were being misinterpreted. He argued that everything he had done was necessary to protect the estate. But every new challenge led investigators back to the same facts: the forged approvals, the redirected mail, the restricted communication, the pressure placed on Opal, the attempts to bury Journey's records before the Ashford sale. Eventually, even Fleming's own partners began distancing themselves. The development group behind the Ashford project quietly removed him from leadership. Their attorneys wanted no connection to misconduct that now appeared throughout official court filings. The shift happened slowly. Then all at once, one morning, Fleming entered a hearing believing he still controlled the future of Ashford House. By afternoon, that control was gone. The court-approved review removed him from a state authority related to the trust and document management process. Independent oversight was assigned. The sale proceeds were frozen until obligations tied to the trust could be completed. Later, a civil settlement required Fleming to repay improperly collected care fees and costs associated with Opal's exploitation. He was not led away in handcuffs. Life was rarely that simple. Instead, he lost what he had spent years protecting: control, influence, access, the ability to decide other people's lives. For Calla, the legal outcome mattered. But it was not the thing she remembered most. What stayed with her was the afternoon Opal chose her new home. Not a room arranged by Fleming. Not a facility selected by lawyers. Not even a place chosen by Calla. Opal picked it herself. A small house outside Westchester, a porch, a garden, 2 rocking chairs. Nothing extravagant, nothing impressive, just peace. When Calla offered to buy additional property nearby, Opal laughed and refused. "I don't need more space," she said. "I just need my own door." For the first time in years, the choice belonged to her. Months later, the trust review reached its conclusion. The language Harlan had written decades earlier was verified. The trustee findings confirmed that Calla qualified as the beneficiary described within the dormant trust provisions. The inheritance discovery made local headlines for a few days. Then people moved on. Calla did too, because by then she understood something she had not understood when the story began. The money was never the point. The truth was. One evening she sat with Opal and a surviving Halstead relative around a dining table covered in old letters. Journey's letters, the last pieces of her voice. Together they read them slowly. There were no shocking revelations left, no final twists. Only a woman trying to protect the future while powerful people tried to control it. Calla listened carefully. Not because Journey was replacing Opal. Because Journey had become part of the truth. And the truth no longer frightened anyone. Weeks later, Calla established a worker protection fund in Journey Halstead's name. The program focused on adult domestic workers trapped by financial coercion, intimidation, and abuse inside private households. She could not undo the past, but she could make it harder for the same thing to happen again. The announcement received attention. The fund mattered. Yet even that was not the final payoff. The final payoff arrived on a quiet autumn afternoon. Ashford House stood nearly empty. The sale process had resumed under independent supervision. Most of the furniture was gone. The rooms echoed differently now. Calla walked through the front entrance beside Opal. Neither woman spoke for several moments. They moved slowly through the house, past the staircase, past the west study, past the rooms where secrets had hidden for decades. Eventually they reached the dining room, the same room where Calla had found her mother kneeling on the floor, the same room where leftovers had been treated like wages. Sunlight spilled across the polished wood. No guest sat at the table. No staff hurried through the room. No one gave orders. Opal stood quietly. Then she straightened her shoulders. Calla noticed something that made her chest tighten. For the first time since entering Ashford House, Opal looked completely unafraid, not brave, free. Calla placed one of Journey's letters on the table, not as evidence, not for court, not for a hearing, just as memory. Opal looked at it for a long moment. Then she finally spoke the name she had spent years avoiding, Journey. The future wasn't there anymore, only sadness and gratitude. Calla reached for her hand. Opal squeezed it gently. Neither woman needed to say the rest. They already understood. One had given Calla life. The other had given her a future. Both mattered. Both always would. Before leaving, Calla walked to the west study, the room that had started everything, the room where the hidden envelope had waited all those years. She locked the door one final time. Then she turned and handed the key to Opal. You decide. Opal stared at it, a small piece of metal, years of pain attached to it, years of fear, years of silence. Then she smiled softly. She placed the key on the table beside Journey's letter and walked toward the front door. This time she left first. Calla followed. The house remained behind them. The secrets remained behind them too. Not forgotten, finally understood. If you had been in Calla's place, would you have forgiven the silence that protected you, or would the years of secrecy have been harder to accept? Let me know what you think.